Good evening, everyone. This is Kamal here.
And I'm Anil here.
Thanks for logging in. And
this is a monthly webinar series. So thank you for joining us.
So Anil, how do you define the first job? If we have to start with that, what is the first job?
Kamal, I think anything that is formal, is a first job post your education. I would consider that as your first job. Though these days people are getting exposure to a lot of summer jobs and internship opportunities, I would seriously look at your formal job as your first job post education.
But having said that, Anil, whether it's your internship, which is key learning part, even if you're a retail promoter, all these kind of so-called odd jobs that many of us do during a student time also has a bearing sometimes on what we do. Why shouldn't that be considered also as a first job? Because you get paid. Some of them could be formal in nature anyhow.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't that be a first job at all?
No, in a certain sense, it could be, Kamal. But then the scope of our discussion is more towards your formal employment, and those jobs you may have done to maybe have a pocket money or a small income, or you're doing something between your school seasons. So I would look at those as things that you do more out of exploration or interest or just to make some pocket money. And formal jobs are much more serious. They are more structured.
So if we had to define the first job, we would define it as your first formal employment post-education.
That's right.
That's what we would call as a first job.
So
for today's purpose, we are only discussing the first formal job post-education.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So Anil, if I had to ask you, when did you start thinking about your first job?
Well, I mean, this question gets asked of you at every life stage, whether you're a 5-year-old kid or you in high school or even in college or even post-college. Obviously, that's the time when this question gets more serious. But then this question gets asked of you, and my personal thing was that I would have told my parents that I wanted to become a pilot or had aspirations to join the defense forces. Both of it, did not fly. So I dropped those.
the hi-fi on pilot stands for me also,
Right.
So for me, it was like pilot, then it became cricketer, then a Bollywood actor, I looked at all of them and, I heard my friends saying that they wanted to become models, So I guess, if you ask the same thing to Sindhu or, late Abdul Kalam or Rahman, I don't know what they would have said then, and what they went on to become eventually.
Right.
So very few people, I guess, get to land in whatever it could be their first job, having thought through their childhood and pursued them, So I think there is no such time as to rightfully start thinking that this is when you start thinking about the job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But Anil, if you want to really move on talking about the considerations, how do you choose your first job, which is what, this webinar is all about today.
Yeah.
Where would it start? Would it start with, let's say, your own aspiration of what you want to become? I would like to believe that money is an important consideration, because it's a context of your life. You don't know whether you have a student loan. We don't know whether your parents have in a kind of a financial context to allow you to study further.
Right.
So there are things involved where I think money plays a crucial factor while choosing.
Right.
What's your take?
No, there are other factors like maybe brand or even the location. A lot of people are constrained by the location that they can go to work.
You mean to say that if you get a great brand, people will compromise on money?
If they had a choice, probably they would.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, sometimes parents do restrict some of their wards from, going off to a different location.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes an important consideration. Although I think that, if you want to be a part of an IT or a startup world, it's imperative that you move to Bangalore or NCR for that region, for that matter. So while those are considerations.
And similarly, creative or financial services goes to Mumbai, would that something that you call as a location would make a key consideration?
Absolutely.
Also?
Yeah, if you're working with the banking or financial services industry, you may look at Mumbai as an important.
But would you actually supersede that over a role and a brand? I thought they would come after choosing, let's say, a brand or a role.
Yeah, if you were to, I mean, this is what we have put out as what we observed, the candidates choosing. But if you were to ask me personally, Kamal, I would probably weigh the role over money, brand, and location. Because I know that if I have landed the right role, I can get all of the other things at some point in time. And we also need to understand that all these boxes nobody can take, in every job.
So if you had to, sort of stick your neck out, Anil, what is the one thing that you say that?
Yeah, I would probably say it's the role, number one factor.
I would say it's brand, Anil, for the reason that I think the brand takes care of most of the other aspects, according to me.
Right.
So I think the brand actually will take care of the role as well, because I think it gives a whole lot of ticks for a person, but that's what I think.
Well, we can argue on that, Kamal, but yeah.
But what about who influences your choice? Anil, is there a kind of a circle of influence that we can look at? Yeah, we've listed out things like parents, siblings, friends, neighbors, celebrities, if you may call. I'm sure, a lot of people saying, at least I've heard Virat Kohli saying that Sachin Tendulkar influenced him to sort of take up cricket.
Right.
And of course, media, what do we read? I'm sure if you pick out the newspaper today, everybody says that, okay, AI and ML are the next thing, and all the engineers, or aspirants must be thinking that, that is a place to be.
Yeah, I mean, your closer circle obviously has a bigger sort of an influence over your choices, not just your career, but even your education. A lot of candidates that we meet say that I chose a certain field because of compulsion from their parents or their siblings. Or just by their peers, who they studied with, their college mates and, schoolmates. So the nearest circle obviously is the biggest influencing factor.
But what is the single most source of influencing that people actually talk about? It's actually the parents, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know how much that is true, but that's what some of the studies have said, that parents are the single source of influence for career choices, because you had to please somebody and you rather please somebody at home.
Right. Yeah.
But if we have to really take a call on who chooses the job, is it you choose the job or the job chooses you?
Yeah. Based on my understanding or observation, Kamal, I think you'll be lucky few if you were to be choosing the job, be it the sector or the company. Often I think the job lands on your table.
Not necessarily, Anil. If you look at premier institutes, if you're an IIM guy, or if you have passed out from IIT, you actually choose the other way around as well.
Yeah, you have 11,000 odd people from IITs, and you have 1.5 million engineers. So the percentage is still small. The percentage of people who get to choose jobs is sort of minuscule, Kamal. Mm-hmm. So most of them get the job, and then they choose their I mean, over the period of first of a couple of jobs, then they would probably choose their career. So there's a big difference between choosing a job and choosing a career. So I think most of the time the job lands, and then you take it up, you explore, you evolve, and then you probably move into what your aspiration may be.
So you're saying that your personal desperation or your context in life actually puts you in a box where the job chooses you and not necessarily you. That's the reality.
Absolutely. So if you have a bank loan, waiting to be paid off, or you've spent 6-7 months searching for your dream job, and you can't wait any further, you may as well go after something which is there in front of you. So I think it's often the job chooses you.
What about your education qualification, Anil? For example, I studied microbiology, and the first job I chose was closer to what I studied. But
was that a career choice by consciously that you decided?
For example, I believe in my case, my employer chose me partly also because I had a microbiology background. So in that way, my qualification was a key precursor to my first job.
Okay.
Of course, I chose the company in a way, but it's not the profession I chose. I wanted to be a microbiologist. All my peers who passed out with me in college today are, good enough scientists in universities overseas and in India in great institutions. So I would have possibly become a research analyst or a microbiologist by profession. but I went on to become a sales guy. So in that context, yes, my context made me choose, a job in sales, and I really didn't know that I was good at it.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, I would put it as the education qualification had a precursor to my job. But I also believe that when the employer is choosing you, your education qualification is what he looks at. True. Most often than not.
True.
But I think in most of the cases, it has some kind of a connect, is what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the first few jobs certainly has linkages to the education that you have, but it's possible to break free from your educational track and to do something very, very different. But yeah, since you're talking about the first jobs, I think it's true. Your education has a bearing on your career.
And does that continue to your job as well? Can we possibly take, let's say, a 5-year horizon and ask ourselves what happens in first 5 years? Because we think that when we choose a job, or let's say we even choose a course, sometimes we think it's a life or death situation.
Right.
Would you attribute that in the first 5 years?
Well, it's a period of experimentation, Kamal, and you're free to explore. You're free to decide what is that you want to do, what is that you're good at.
And what do you mean by what are you good at?
Kamal, you always try to arrive at what your strengths are, and how you come to know where your strengths are depends on the feedback that you get from your bosses and your environment, your peers, the results that you're generating. Results actually leap out as the most important criteria to know whether you're good at a job or not. Then,
but also that could be lopsided. No, results can be a fluke too sometimes.
Yeah, but then if you are consistently producing results, then you know that you are good in that field. Third thing could be, Kamal, ease of doing a job. When you really are effortlessly doing a certain thing, and are you deriving joy out of doing that? That's another parameter that you want to look at. And whether you're really growing, Kamal, whether you're growing from one level to the next level, that is an indicator of whether you're good at the job or not. And finally, if you're asked to work on some strategic and important projects in your company, you should certainly consider that you've now moved on from your survival sort of instincts to something really big. You've done well in your job, and that's why you've been asked to do those other important initiatives. So you should certainly consider that you're good in your job if all these ticks are there. But what about organizational experience, Kamal? What are the factors that you would see as what you derive as an organizational experience?
I think for a fresher, the first thing that happens when you join a company is you learn how to build a routine in work, which is very important because we don't know how to possibly work in an organizational setting.
Right.
The second thing is working with a team. If you went to a college and you possibly were close to somebody and you passed out with the same person as your best friend, it wouldn't matter much at an education or a college level. But when you come to work, you have to work with people whom you don't know and who may not even like, for example, and possibly produce the results that the organization expects you to. So that way, working in a team is a kind of an organizational experience. Getting the exposure to the process of an organization working in a particular discipline, getting the technology experience. Many organizations have large technology platforms through which you are supposed to deliver, right, irrespective of whether you're in the IT industry or not. So getting that exposure, working under pressure. I don't think working for a pressure for exams to get some marks and working under pressure to produce results for a company which is commercially oriented are the same.
Right.
So that is a key organizational experience. And then a lot of realities related to work, which is difficult to comprehend. For example, if you fail in the job that you're doing, what is that you would do? Things like increments. People don't know how to deal with when you get a good one or you don't get a good one. Promotions.
Right.
All these things happens around you. The most important thing is the experience of the industry, the domain, the markets that you're operating. And not to forget the dynamics of organization and the leadership ecosystem that you learn. These are all very, very invaluable things which happens to you in the first 5 years, invariable to you, as you work in an organization. And that also actually leads to the next thing of building a network.
Right. So, Kamal, it's okay to sort of experiment in the first few jobs, right? I mean, later on in your career, it's not held against you that you were experimenting a little too much in your early part of your career.
You say experiment deliberately? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, because it's getting to the workforce is a big transition in your life. You may not always get it right, isn't it? So if it is shows poorly on your resume that you changed say 3 jobs in the first 5 years, I think recruiters are much more understanding of that situation. But much later in your life, if you tend to, of course, change jobs and you are considered a job hopper, or you're seen as somebody who can't be, judging, right? You can't make the right judgments. So
I thought stability,
yeah,
is dead, is what I thought.
right.
So I think, sticking to the first 5 years, I mean, would you say that what happens in first 5 years rather defines your career life?
Well, it may be, or in some cases, but it does set the tone for the rest of your career in a way. So yeah, I would say that in a way it's important. The first 5 years would be important to really make up your mind on what is the direction that you want to take. So directionally, it's an important phase.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be breaking ahead if the first 5 years what we did does not have any link to the future. But what you're saying is that it definitely has a link.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. In terms of tomorrow's jobs, after let's say what happens, in the first 5 years that we're looking at, what are the things that one can expect as tomorrow's jobs, Anil, where the somebody who's passing out needs to look at as a kind of a consideration?
Yeah, I think the freelancing is becoming really big as a career option coming now, because as you see from this statistic, which is of course the US data, you can see the permanent job and the freelancing jobs in terms of pay scales are almost equal. They're catching up. So it is becoming, even freelancing jobs are becoming formal jobs.
But is it relevant, Anil? Freshers getting a freelancing job sounds a little overrated to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option that you have, Kamal. If you're good at something, you may not necessarily just choose a full-time job, a 9 to 5 job. You have an option of going for a freelancing. Of course, if you had some past experiences, you've done some projects during your education, you can showcase that as your resume for a freelancing project. But yeah, this may not necessarily be the direction for everybody, but this is an option that is becoming much serious as we go forward.
And one of the things that is quite frequently talked about, written about, is entrepreneurship.
Right.
Can tomorrow's first job also be entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more than ever before, Kamal, the entrepreneurship ecosystem is much stronger now. It's much more established. So raising capital or getting mentorship or structuring your company's finances or understanding the legal system, all of this is much more accessible to people today. From some anecdotal experience, I can say that talking to some of my senior colleagues who have their kids passing out of engineering colleges, I would say that about 40-50% of them have decided to go for entrepreneurship, although they have campus offers. That is sort of an eye opener to me, Kamal, that this is becoming a more serious career option these days, and you don't necessarily need a lot of experience behind you to become an entrepreneur.
So you're saying, when people are choosing their first job, entrepreneurship is an option, becoming a freelancer is an option. Absolutely. Besides what we are already used to, the full-time employment per se.
Yeah, why just think of seeking career, Kamal? Why not go after these roads which may not be so well traveled, but then these are options that are there for sure. So Kamal, we have some questions that prior to our webinar we received, and we've listed those questions. So we'll try and attempt to answer these questions. First question is obviously our parents, because they are important part of your circle of influence. Are they equipped to handle the career advice or choices of their wards, their kids? What do you think?
I would like to believe they are equipped. But like all human decisions, we all have biases on the decisions. Right. Parents also have an aspirations, and some of us want to see our kids doing what possibly we couldn't achieve. So I think though they're equipped, I always believe that there is a sense of bias through which they work. And yeah, I think to the second part of the question of how do they keep themselves updated with what's happening today, I think even though they are updated, I'm sure most of the parents are updated. Most of them are working parents, as we know. So there is a fair amount of ecosystem that developed for themselves to understand what's happening. I still think there is a kind of a bias which rules them, but the question is more about how do they keep themselves updated. So I think they need to go beyond their comfort zone and their ecosystem to actually look at what else is happening in the world and relate to what the kids want. Sometimes when a kid walks in and says, I want to be in conservation, I want to look at ecology kind of thing. Hey, we say, what is there in that? Because we don't know. I just said that to my niece last week. I said, what is that? Because I lined up a whole lot of jobs which are internationally. I thought the line that she should be, and said these are the courses you should do. She said, no, I want to be in college. I just couldn't think of where would she get that job. That was always in my mind. So I think we have to. For me, then, and I went and did a research to figure out where else those courses and jobs can lead to. So I think living in the world that we live in, our own ecosystem, is a kind of a deterrent. Going outside of that and learning what else is happening is the way we can actually look at.
But we also need to keep in mind that jobs itself are changing. The nature of jobs are changing. The jobs that we had 20 years back, 30 years back may never exist, in the future. So this is a tricky area, but I think the parents can guide them and support them and offer them approaches to arrive at their own decisions rather than giving them choices, handing out choices to them. And when it comes to parents, Kamal, the objectivity goes out of the window. So, it's, in my view, better not to advise and just give them a framework or an approach to help them decide, come to their own decision. But I also find that today there are more career fairs and there are, other kind of exposure that parents and, students can go to just to get a view or an insight on what different careers may mean, which did not exist many years back. So that option exists.
Fair enough. I think one of the other questions which have come is, if I'm unhappy with my first job and want to quit, will it affect my long-term career? I would also, add to that, it's not just about you quitting. It's also you might get fired. A lot of us don't know how to work,
right,
when in our first jobs. So we end up sort of emulating what we did in college, or we look at the people sitting next to us and try to do the job the same way. And that may not be the best way, an employer may be expecting of you. So you may also get fired, So for me, if I'm unhappy, I possibly will quit my first job. Will it affect my long-term career? My answer is no. For the reason of what we said earlier, that your first 5 years, you really don't know what you're good at and what kind of employers are the place that you will work for. So it's quite likely that you may make some mistakes, silly mistakes, which you did not intend to do. So it's quite possible that your first job could be a disaster for you and your employer both. And I think career is like a marathon. You're possibly another 30 years to run. So I would not be perturbed about somebody getting fired from their first job or possibly quitting their job in no time. And that is happening all around us. And as you can see, 60% of the youngsters today who do not have a bond actually quitting their job in the first year. That's the data.
Right. Yeah, layoffs shouldn't be taken personally, Kamal. As much as it's very traumatic to go through that experience, it's something that every employee should understand, that it's nothing to do personally with them. It's the context or the circumstance that may lead them to be laid off. So yeah, I agree that
Have you fired anybody, Anil, to whom it was his or her first job?
No, Kamal, I haven't had that. Yeah, I was just a misfortune of firing somebody like that.
Okay, I have, so that's the reason I asked. And it's you feel really, at heart of it, that you have done injustice to the person. But sometimes you look back and say, how the hell did I do that?
Right.
But it has happened to me, and I'm not very proud of it. But I have seen, youngsters who chose the job, whom we thought that they were bringing the best, promised them that we will change their career, only to see 6 months later that they were not fitting in, either because of their effort levels or because their interests were elsewhere and they just chose the job for whatever reasons. It's a terrible thing to happen, but I've seen those guys doing very well in their life thereafter. It's almost like we've released them from a prison.
Right. The last question is about choosing a high-paying job at a startup or a low-paying one with an established company. So this is, of course, a classical dilemma that some of them would have faced, at least, I guess.
I have my personal opinion is I would go with a low paying one with an established company.
Right.
For the reason that you tend to learn the systems and processes of a large company. You specialize in something, though you can see that they put you in a pigeonhole and teach you something. But you also, because in a large company, you tend to see around things around you, and which allows you to sort of get a larger perspective, great exposure to technology, processes, leadership, people, the processes kind of, and you get very disciplined in some of these aspects, which I think is a great asset to see when you are young as to what do large resources mean. My preference would be a large company.
Yeah, my preference would be the other way, Kamal, which is to go after, even if the salary is the same between a startup and a well-established company, I'll probably go with the startup, because the adrenaline rush that you get out of working in an environment which is still evolving and a fledgling organization, the access to leadership and the opportunity to work on many critical areas, I think is a big attraction for me, and I would probably go with the startup.
Fair enough, Anil. On that note, we disagree, but do we have any other questions? We don't have any other questions.
No, I think we're done.
We're done. Thank you very much all for tuning in, and we hope to see you next month again, the new topic, and hopefully with more questions and discussions.
Thanks, guys, and wish you a great new year coming up.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.